It's going to burst. The same thing in the pipeline. If you have a pipeline that's designed for 500 liters or 500,000 liters, if your demand outstrip that, then you want to expand, you can't put 1,000 liters in a structure that is designed for 500. That's the challenge we're having. That's why we've been hearing of grid collapses, load rejection, and you can't store electricity. If a megawatt is generated and is rejected, where is that going to go? There are several reasons why we tend to have grid collapses, and we might continue to have grid collapses as a nation because we haven't really done what we ought to do. And who's in charge? Federal government keeps on to the transmission infrastructure. TCN is still a federal asset, but is a regulated entity. NRC is the one in charge. And when we had those grid collapses in the past, well, there were no sanctions. It was as if nobody was in charge. We didn't hear that anybody was seriously sanctioned, and the right certain things were done radically. As a country, we've made our mistakes in the power sector. Quite a number of those mistakes. Now, we must be ready to start to take certain serious, critical decisions, tough decisions as a country, both at the level of the grid infrastructure and the entire power sector as a sector.
Indeed, Prof. Thanks for that overview, because part of the answer to the question I was thinking of are already embedded in your opening overview. But I was going to ask the part that the National Electricity Regulatory Council is supposed to be playing in all of this. And it has also been said that they themselves, that body itself, seems to lack the structures, facilities to effectively do its job. Because one of the things I'm thinking about is that surely they would have seen this coming if all was well. And then two, there have been a number of efforts at ameliorating this situation. You recall, Prof, in fact, you shared something with me, I think it was last week or so, something about observations on the efforts to MAPI, the meter acquisition, that initiatives where, look, let's spread these meters as wide as possible so we can get revenue from being able to monitor consumption and all of that. But even that couldn't be pulled off effectively, such that the NERC had directed such monies to indeed be refunded. But even that has become something of a quagmire, not to call it a mess. So one begins to look at the whole process of regulating, and I would actually substitute the word understanding the power sector and the power grid in the country. I mean, it does seem to be in a comatose state. Perhaps that's the way it seems to those of us that are outside looking in.
That's an important observation you've made, and you made those observations quite correctly. Once you privatize, supposedly, the only job of a government is effective, serious-minded, knowledge-based regulation, because government cannot continue to be a player. So with the privatization, then we had the NERC, meaning government now was ready to regulate. Effective regulation is a question of the framework, the law that you have to regulate, and the regulatory instrument that have been put in place, as well as how do you deploy and apply those laws to achieve set objectives in this sector. I think we are challenging that. For several years, since 2005, we've been talking about the fact that this law, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, then was not a law meant to operationalize the power sector, because we pointed out several errors, well over 200 documented. We gave it to them, and government couldn't immediately amend the law then, because then, according to them, it was reached out to them, they said they just privatized, and it wouldn't make sense to start to change the goalpost when a crucial goal was just scored. that made sense. After privatization, we said, oh, now this law will undermine the power sector. It took a while. We just had a law. They even changed by the name reform. It was a law meant to reform the power sector, no doubt. Mm-hmm. But now that we are done reforming, we now needed the law to regulate the sector. We just had that few months ago with the signing of the Electricity Act 2003 by President Buhari. So meaning we are just about to start. But even most of the suggestions we made in the old law, quite frankly, have been incorporated, but not effectively implemented because it's still early to start to now measure those. But then, effective regulation is key. The regulator is central to the success of the sector, of any sector. So everybody, I think there seems to be a consensus of opinion among Nigerians and industry players and observers that we haven't had the fortune of serious matter regulation in the power sector because government is no longer involved. And if you don't effectively regulate, you'll be challenged. Let me allude briefly to what you mentioned as to MAP, meter access provider. We used to have CAPMI. CAPMI was a kind of a credit scheme that would give Nigerians access to buy meters and pay after a while. Now, meaning if you want to buy a meter, you can procure a meter, pay 25,000 naira, then your subsequent electricity bill will have a bit of credit to get back to your money with which you purchase the meter, because meters are supposed to be assets of the discos. Then that company was working, and all of a sudden they changed it to MAP, meter asset provider, which was somewhat similar, but given to corporate entities distinct from the discos. What we realized was that most of the discos are still indirectly owners of MAP. And that was supposed to be a repayment structure for Nigerians that are paid for meters. And we are saying, since this MAP started, how many Nigerians have been credited, have got refunds for meters they purchased? All is not well. Somebody was in charge or still in charge of those things. And we're not seeing the effectiveness because Nigerians ought not to pay for meters ordinarily. They just ought not to pay for poles. They ought not to pay for transformers and all those assets. But then we are where we are because we are challenged in terms of effectiveness of regulation. Everything boils down to regulation. Even TCN, that is still federal government, within the federal government purview, is a regulated entity. But how much of regulation do we have? At the level of TCN, in this age of artificial intelligence, AI, you mean you have a transmission infrastructure and you cannot have a station like a situation room where you monitor all the entirety of the transmission infrastructure that you have in the country, and you get early warning signals and signs from those to know where those challenges and forces are coming from. So, I mean, we still a lot of challenges. I don't even know what to say. I don't want to disrupt anybody, but it seems overwhelming. And you know my worry, sir. One last point on that. Know my worry. In 2012, I was almost going to call a bad name. We had what was called Manitoba Hydro issue. Manitoba Hydro was a Canadian entity known in Canada. Manitoba Hydro had transmission management contract with Nigerian Transmission Company to come and manage this so-called transmission infrastructure in 2012.
Okay.
That 2011. When, I mean, the contract was shrouded in secrecy, I raised serious objections. Because nobody was listening to me, I now had to write. I actually commissioned a research paper, an article that I published, and I deliberately published the article in the University of Manitoba Law Journal, so that the Canadian audience will hear that their company was about to fail in Nigeria because certain things were not being done right, and it was going to bring about or create a kind of corporate responsibility issues. Of course, the Manitoba contract burst within months after I wrote the papers, and people started saying whether MLK had access to certain certain intelligence, either from Canada or Nigeria. No, I said no, because we're not doing the right thing. My Toba Hydro was to manage the transmission infrastructure. They left 2012, 2013, they left. Now we have Siemens. And when Rewani, the renowned Rewani and I appeared on another station, we were talking about this Siemens thing. He seems to be a bit optimistic, and I wasn't as optimistic as a practical person on the field. And now we are where we are. Siemens has been home, and the president had to go to Germany to go and engage the German chancellor to speed up Siemens miracles that we are still expecting. I'm not as optimistic to tomorrow. Maybe I want to be pleasantly surprised. I felt Siemens deal will go the way of the Manitoba as predicted in Manitoba, also as predicted in Siemens, because I saw the contract, I saw something that I wasn't quite comfortable with. But then I'm not the regulator. I can't speak for government. I'm not the one in charge. I'm just a concerned Nigeria, and I've been talking for more than 2 decades as to what we need to do, and we're not ready to do. I don't think we've done and we're ready to do those things, but I expect Nigeria now to start to take very serious and unpleasant decisions in the power sector if you must get it right.
Well, one hopes that that indeed will be the case, but when one looks at the fact that when you compare what we are playing with in Nigeria, talking about 3,000 megawatts, there is a concern. It is said to be grossly inadequate, especially when you compare one with our aspirations, our ambitions. Here we are inviting the world to come to Nigeria. The market is open. President Bola Tinubu has been carrying that campaign. We're ready and willing to do business. But how can you do any of this without power? Now, I want to ask you, Prof, incessant grid collapses is one thing. We've touched very, very briefly on that. But there are calls for subsidy removal in the power or energy sector. I didn't even, well, maybe enlighten us a bit about the nature of, subsidy in that sector.
Let me start from where you initially
took
off, because that's important. Said we were having 3,000 megawatts before. To let Nigerians know we're in a deep mess and need to do something urgently. If we're not having power, nobody's going to develop. We're not going to develop anyway. So let's be realistic. We're having 3,000 megawatts before privatization. More than 10 years after privatization, we're still oscillating around 3,000, 4,000. And we privatize, meaning not significant megawatts have been added despite privatization. And there are documented challenges and reasons why that is so. And that's not the topic for today anyway, but it talks about a whole lot of structuring issue, privatization issues that we'll be talking about. I will not stop talking about it. So, if we are generating even less than what we are generating then, and government now spending more in the supposedly privatized power sector, definitely you don't need a social to tell you that all is not well with the power sector in Nigeria, and invariably Nigeria. We'll get there. We're all optimistic we'll get there. Coming to the issue of subsidy, I hear me okay. I'm of the considered view, speaking for myself, that Nigeria is spending, the energy sector now as a bunch is over subsidized. We just got done away with the subsidy in the petroleum sector with the bold step taken by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And I have to open on that. A lot of Nigerians are not aware that power sector is also seriously subsidized at various levels. We have MBUT, Nigerian Bulk Electricity Trading Company. That is a bulk trader that buys whatever megawatt that is generated so that the gencos will continue to produce. And whatever is produced, whether or not it's consumed, is paid for or guaranteed by the federal government. There are levels of subsidy in the power sector. I am of the opinion that we are subsidizing inefficiency. Who are we subsidizing? Because the same thing in the petroleum sector. The subsidy in the power sector is huge. That's not the real topic for the day, because we don't want to go into the mathematics of subsidy. But who are we subsidizing? At what point? Let me give you a typical scenario of a yam seller. As a government, we want to subsidize yam consumption by Nigerians, either boiled or fried yam. And we keep giving money to the yam seller. Buy tubers of yam, get 50% discount, supply yam to Nigerians. We are subsidizing waste. The yam seller will go and buy rotten yam and peel off the waste and only be able to fry like 10 or 15% of the tubers of yam to the end users. So if you want to subsidize yam consumers, we'll say yam seller, we will subsidize the place of yam given to Nigerians. The man or woman selling yam will go and buy edible yam that are healthy so that most of the yam will not go to waste. So meaning you are subsidizing actual consumption, not the production. So we are subsidizing waste. In the UK, they subsidize power. But you go to get the bill of an average person living in the United Kingdom. You're going to see the electricity bill. You're going to see the actual amount that government is paying or has paid or will be paying to the generator, to the distribution companies, not generation. So when you subsidize hugely at the level of generation and transmission, you have not factored in transmission losses. If you subsidize 5,000 megawatts, by the time it gets to the tables of Nigerians to consume for electricity, for ironing, to watch TVC and other stations, the actual megawatts that is really available in terms of subsidy might be less than 2,000 megawatts. So you subsidize waste. So you don't subsidize effort, you subsidize result. So then what are we subsidizing? The discourse will tell you about their cost per unit of megawatts or cost per unit of kilowatt. Let's do the mathematics. Cost includes everything you spend, both for gas, both for your personnel and the rest. And we have challenges in collection, lack of efficiency in bill collection. And those will now go into subsidies of the federal government. Government is now paying for inefficiency even in collecting bills. Some homes, some estates, you have 10 flats, 8 of the flats are bypassed, 2 flats are the one paying for the power consumed in a particular location, and you are now subsidizing. We are subsidizing waste and inefficiency. When you get the discourse now to work on their overall cost, to bring on board efficiency, serious efficiency in the distribution, then you minimize the waste. So we can now determine what is actually being subsidized by the federal government if you must subsidize. But the power sector is not designed for that kind of subsidy. In the old Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005, I argued the same thing when tariffs were about to be increased. I said you cannot even think of increasing tariff without first putting PCAF in place. PCAF is a statutory obligation. PCAF is Power Consumer Assistance Fund. PCAF it was in the old law. Gladly, PCAF framework is in the Electricity Act recently signed by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. And Nigerians should be surprised to know that the PCAF structure has not been constituted. That is a mechanism that gives subsidy to poor, underprivileged Nigerians to be able to consume electricity when tariffs are being jacked up. So when you don't put PCAF in place, you end up subsidizing the high income earners, those who can afford their patterns of consumption, putting on AC for 24 hours. Not those who need electricity just to hide the clothes and watch TV in the night, maybe 1 or 2 points of fan to cool off for an hour or two. So there is great inefficiency in the management of the subsidy framework because PCAF has not been effectuated, even under the old law and under the current laws. There's a lot of challenges in the power sector.
It still is scary, nevertheless, to hear people calling for subsidy removal, even as you have explained it, that most Nigerians don't even realize that the sector is being subsidized. You referred to the UK briefly, and I recall, Prof, that there was a real crisis, consternation in the cost of electricity, the government was even talking about needing to come in and help, not about reducing, but it was such as it was, and there was danger. We don't have the climate where people could freeze to death, overnight in their beds in Nigeria, but it's as serious as it is over there. And there was an outcry that especially elderly citizens couldn't afford the electricity they needed to survive. So I was looking at, if anybody is calling for subsidy removal, such as you've explained to us, that unless you might not have known, but we're actually being subsidized. I mean, look at what has happened as a result of the removal of subsidy on fuel. Now remove subsidy, people can hardly pay what is required now. Yet, I take your explanation on board. The whole thing is looking a bit suicidal. If the right thing...
The subsidy is wrongly channeled. That's my conclusion. The subsidy is strongly channeled. If you want to subsidize Nigerians, we know who to be subsidized. This subsidy is going into wrong avenues, going to wrong pockets, going to the wrong source who wouldn't even need it. So in the first instance,
in the analogy of the yam that you made, Prof, I beg your pardon, in the yam analogy, you spoke about the sellers. You didn't even go to the producers, the farmers. So I was waiting for a connect in there.
No, what we're saying is this: if you are, let's take it that the seller has produced yam, they are sold it to the retailer. And the retailer is now to give to those who are going to go, the wholesaler rather, and the wholesaler is going to give it to the retailer. And if you are saying you want to subsidize yam for consumption, please subsidize the plate of yam given to me, not the tubers of yam. Because if you subsidize tubers of yam, you are telling the yam wholesaler to be buying rotten yams. At the end of the day, most of the yams will get it off as waste. The quantum that will be fried or roasted for me, put on my table, will be less than 10% of the actual tuber.
All right.
Meaning, we've been subsidizing waste. That's just this analogy. So if you want to subsidize, we know who to subsidize. And Nigerians, really, who really need these subsidies, honestly, but if you give them 2-3 hours of electricity per day, they will be fine. It's just to hire their cloth and do basic things.
If they can depend on the regularity of such a minuscule supply.
I still say, and Nigerians are willing and ready to pay slightly more for electricity if it's available.
You think, Prof?
But
you think so, Prof?
Nigerians to pay for darkness is criminal.
I got to take a break. I got to take a break now, Prof, and this is quite exciting as you're explaining it to the public. We'll take a break. When we come back, we'll look at the gas constraints and, as it relates to the collapse of the grid, incessant collapse of the grid, and also the issue of dishonesty within the system. Talking here about energy theft. I don't know if that's a particularly unique Nigerian situation. We'll be right back. Please stay with us, Prof.
Our home, threatened by man's activities, with fears of mass extinction on the rise. On Green Angle, we examine the issues that affect our environment, seek solutions to put us on track to secure and restore a cleaner and greener world for generations to come.
Lagos is the most visited state in Africa as the 5th largest economy on the continent, covering the state and its government. Its economy feeds. It's a busy beat. We go beyond the curtain of tapes to traveling far into the deep.
I want to thank the Lagos State government for the healthcare facility.
To bring stories that cut across all spectrums.
A greater Lagos shall be ours.
We tell you stories that define our collective well-being as Lagosians. I'm Adedoja Salamadini. I live in Lagos, inside Lagos.
Information is power, information is security, information is knowledge. On Labor Lens, we believe that working people around the world have real questions of their own. They want to know how the world of work operates, what it means to the employer of labor, how policies affect workers in the workplace. On Labor Lens, I ensure we engage effectively the organized labor, organized private sector, and government to get out of them information workers are in need of. I am Sharon Ijason, asking questions that make you get sense of the workplace.
Okay, welcome back. And our guest is Professor Yemi Oke, Professor of Energy and Electricity Law at the University of Lagos. He's joining us remotely by Zoom. And continuing the conversation where Professor Oke has been explaining some of the constraints and features of the Nigerian power sector, we spoke, and we can't speak at length on the whole matter of the subsidizing of the sector. Okay, but just before I continue, Reverend Dominic has come on the line. Good morning to you, Reverend Dominic.
Good morning, Chief Yori.
Thank you.
Good morning to that wonderful professor.
Thank you very much for calling in, sir. Please be brief, sir.
Yeah. Yori, the issue of power in Nigeria, I think you can hear me, have become a troublesome. In the sense that in 1999, when this government when democrats come into power, nobody, even the professor, did not believe we will stay 10 years and we will not have a stable power. In fact, there was a minister in Obasanjo government who spoke the truth, we can call it truth now, that will take Nigeria 50 years to get power. And when everybody cried, in fact, government have to go back to press and say, we don't take that. But the taking us where we are now is like we're going to get us just 50 years, God forbid, to get that power. But you know, what is bothering me is this. After unbundling the NEPA, we know, the system become more complicated than before. I told you last year, November, I have a prepaid meter I've been using since 2012. I bought it with 25,000 naira. I had professor say they should give us meter and we repay. Nobody has paid me that for 25,000 naira since 2012. November, they kept to get it off. I went to the office, as you know me. They said, well, the meter is 10 years. They have to remove it. I said, you know, for the first day you gave me this meter, it will expire by 10 years. You're not making a provision for now one. Now you're putting me to what they call postpaid. Now, after you know about 10 years ago, that meter will expire by November. Now, since November, I'm in postpaid, no lights, and before I'm not worried because I have prepaid. Whether light come or not, I know I pay what I got. Now they're going to bring me bill of darkness. Who does that?
Yes.
You talk about UK or United Kingdom. It's also the same thing. That in UK, every 10 years, meter expires. What in UK, when it's expired, they're replacing. But in Nigeria, we have the best professors, engineers. 10 years later, we are going back. They told us today that it's no more 150,000, it's not 156,000. And when I pay it, I have to wait for 3 months. Kind of a system is this?
Thank you very much, Reverend Dominic. These are part of the frustrations within the system. Professor, okay, you've heard of the good Reverend. You've heard of his woes. But please comment on that, if you will. But also, let's move on to the matter of, you know, the gas constraints we're hearing so much about. And indeed, in the midst of all of this milieu, energy thefts. How big a problem is that?
Gas constraint is there because most is the feedstock for most of the power that is generated and distributed in Nigeria, no doubt. But gas is an international commodity. So meaning, you know, the reality on ground is such that on the one hand, gas is being demanded all over the world as a hugely crucial product. Then we have the Petroleum Industry Act. We had some regulations before now. It's now being codified in the Petroleum Industry Act. And Nigerian gas producers are supposed to have domestic gas obligation, meaning if you are producing 10 cubic feet of gas, you have to reserve like 2, 3 for local consumption. That is the law. That is an ambitious law because what are the incentives for them to produce gas? Gas, before they produce, is bought and sold in international markets at prevailing international prices. I said so. If with the increase in dollar, an average gas producer will prefer to sell at export rate because we can't be producing gas at competitive rate for local consumption, meaning the gas producer should produce gas at a loss. No business person will want to go and venture into a sector and produce at a loss because government is not going to refund the money. Those are the issues that brought about subsidy, indirect subsidy in the power sector before. But Nigeria is a hugely endowed country when we talk of gas. How much of gas production are we doing? How much of gas production are we doing even for the so-called CNG, for domestic gas, which is called LPG, liquefied petroleum gas, for industrial gas, and others, for NLNG and the rest? So there is shortage of gas production in Nigeria, not gas reserve. We have huge gas reserve in Nigeria in several billions, but we are not producing enough gas. That is one. Two, aside gas, can't we look at other options to generate electricity? So gas and hydro will seem to be the most cost-effective, the cheapest options. But there are several options to generate power. So gas constraint is there. And we have some of the gas-fired plants now about to be privatized. We are saying, oh, don't privatize yet, wait a few months, so that we can put things together so that the privatization will not go the way of the privatization of the discos. But then, we're not producing enough gas. Assuming we produce enough gas, you've been hearing of hydro generation, trapped megawatts. Some of the turbines are generated power through gas. They cannot evacuate onto the national grid for the same reason that I mentioned, because there will be grid collapses, meaning this container is designed for 500 liters.
Yeah.
Now you have produced 1,000 liters. You can't pour it in. This pipeline is produced to take so amount of liters. Now you have expanded in terms of social infrastructure, economic activities beyond the pipeline that is laid. Have you laid additional pipelines? Have you created additional reservoirs?
I see the challenge, like Prof. I beg your pardon for interrupting you. I beg your pardon for interrupting you, but I see the challenge. Thank you very much, sir. Femi in Alagbado has been waiting to join us. Good morning, Femi.
Good morning, Uncle Yori, and good morning to your guests.
Thank you for calling in.
Yeah. My own view, the way I view the government privatization of the power sector is just an advanced Yahoo against Nigerian people, fully backed by the federal government. So in the sense that I don't understand when you say something to somebody, you must have done due diligence. So what is needed to run that company? He now buys it and says that he can be giving you power on estimated deal. You have done your due diligence. You must know that you are going to give beta to people before you can buy that company. You bought it. Now, for almost 10 years, they are running those things the way they like. Number two, I want to ask your guest, is it impossible for us to divest, to become Hello, good morning.
Oh, we've gone past that. Please continue. Don't bother. We've gone way past that. That was a delayed feedback. Femi in Alagbado. Oh dear. I think the whole, Prof, you heard some of the things.
I got him.
Yes.
I got him. And incidentally, the message I sent to you last night says was something written by another colleague which says the framework, the map is the Yahoo thing.
Indeed, I saw you smile there.
And we use the word, the whole sector is the Yahoo thing, but it's not being perpetrated by the federal government, definitely. Not the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, but I can say that for a fact because by antecedent we know here is a man who had, not knowing what the nature had in stock for him, tried to also undo this over-centralization of power generation, transmission, and distribution. I always say that with the Lagos example, that was frustrated by the federal government, but unfortunately now is in
by the then federal government, not this.
By the then federal government. And nature has created it in a way that the man who got frustrated then now has the yam and the knife of the power sector. So Nigerians are waiting now. So now the total federal mind is you. So no federal mind excuses now. And we are hot chat. I'm sure something will be done. So federal government, I've seen the body language of the current federal government, which is positive. And that is why some of us are encouraged to keep digging, to keep studying the challenges, to keep coming up with solutions. There is nothing I'm going to say anywhere on here that I will not put my own research-based practical solutions or suggestions. Because these things, it's not just to talk about the challenges, we also must talk about the way out.
Some of the solutions.
So talking about the issue of gas, I said let's incentivize gas production if gas being an international commodity.
Yes, sorry to jump in, Prof. Yes, indeed, you did. I'm so sorry to jump in. Apologies, sir. But yes, we did get the point that you made. You even made the other point about possibly, can't we explore alternatives? Hydro, exactly. Now, how?
So we are done with that.
Yes, in the midst of this milieu, energy theft. How great a threat is that to our aspirations?
It's a major threat, no doubt. And I will blame the discourse. Do you know I'm going to blame the discourse? And I'm going to say this on here for Nigerians to hear. I did a seminar for judges and justices and stakeholders in Kaduna. It was sponsored by Kaduna and Kano Discourse. We are talking about this same challenge. And
by the way, Kano, sorry, sir. By the way, Kano Disco that you mentioned just reminded me that they say they have been refunding to consumers, the investment.
No, they say, but let me not put anybody. Let me not put anybody on the spot now in terms of what they are saying they are doing or not doing. But the issue is this. So we went for that training, and somebody was talking about one of the operators. I think Kano was talking about their challenge of Bashiga, meaning you cannot enter. You can't enter and you are supplying them electricity. You can't enter to take stock or reading of their meter for purpose of billing. That's a major problem. So meaning they're going to be supplying electricity at a loss because they keep consuming and they can't access to know the number of consumers. And the way their homes are built there is interlocked. You have one small house and you have several huts behind. So that's a challenge. Then we now had another training for the Abuja. And I said, what are you doing about this state? You produce the steel. You are talking of your AT&T losses, meaning aggregate transmission and distribution loss and what have you. I said, you are losing so much, and you're putting the cost on the few consumers that you have without increasing the consumer nest or the net of production. But if you have 3,000 megawatts, your cost of production of 3,000 megawatts is going to be spread on consumers. So if the same thing, if you have 20,000 megawatts, you're going to spread the cost and it won't be as expensive. It's about effectiveness. And we now said there are laws that you can make recourse to prosecute these offenders. And we have to tell them that there is miscellaneous provisions act, the penal code, the criminal code act provisions for electricity law. Just because of the inadequacies of the old law that said was a law meant to reform. The law then, the Electric Power Sector Reform Act, provides insufficiently for theft and related criminal law issues in the power sector. And we criticized and we also suggested what could be done. Gladly, of course, they listened to it because we now have robust criminal law provisions in the Electricity Act of 2023, Part 10, devotes sections 208 to 223 to electricity offenses.
Okay.
Theft of electricity is provided for. Theft of electricity lines and materials. There is receiving stolen electricity, interfering with meters, intentionally disrupting power supply. All the offenses that were not provided for are now being provided for in the laws. Meaning, we have a job at hand. We need now to ensure that we implement and invoke these laws.
Okay, let me bring in. I beg your pardon, sir. Sorry to interrupt you. You know the nature of our program. Mr. George has been waiting for quite a while. Good morning to you, Mr. George. Thank you for holding on.
Thank you, Uncle Yori. Uncle Yori, it's about 5 months or plus now that the ministers took over in this government. The Minister of Power, I stand to be corrected, up to now has not presented his roadmap to the Nigerian public. Minister of Interior, he didn't spend 1 month in the office before he presented his own. Minister of Digital Economy did not spend 1 month before he presented his own. Minister of Works, Minister of Abuja, they didn't spend 1 month before they presented their roadmap. But that was as important as power is. We've not seen the roadmap presented by this Minister of Works or Minister of Power. The national grid collapses almost on a monthly basis. We don't hear him say anything. Uncle Yori, I'm aware that Governor El-Rufai, before he went for the Senate confirmation hearing, had already formed a team that he wished to address this power issue. Unfortunately, I don't know what went wrong. If you ask me, I will advise the president to bring El-Rufai back to that ministry and redeploy this minister. Since his ability lies elsewhere, not in power.
Okay, Mr. George, thank you very much for calling. Really, we're fast running out of time. Prof.
That's an opinion. That's an opinion. All I know is that the president reserved the right to appoint people and assign them roles. And I know the Minister of Power, of course, the country is challenged as an entity, so not an isolated case, but then we talk of the power sector. Okay. I'm sure you must have been trying his best. So I'm sure he has a roadmap somewhere to be unveiled, if not unveiled already.
Prof, there are a couple of other things that I really wanted to touch upon, and we're fast running out of time. This whole matter about the loyalty or patriotism of Nigerians when it comes to national assets. And here I'm talking about assets and facilities vandalization. How serious a problem is it in the power sector?
It's a major problem. It's a major problem. Unfortunately, the law didn't envisage the magnitude of the problem before. It's now that the law is now providing for it. Maybe the miscellaneous offenses has provided for something in terms of theft and related issues, but then it weren't seeing substantial levels of implementation or application of the laws to try offenders. When we have talk of national assets, and that's why I said in one of my write-ups that the Nigerians are the ones undermining Nigeria. Because, you know, when we have national assets, it's an asset for all of us. And Nigerians have vandalized. Some bad, unconscionable Nigerians, unpatriotic elements will go and vandalize it. If you vandalize power assets, how do you expect that there will be power supply?
What is the reason for the vandalization? Is it just so that the administration of the day shall fail or not be able to deliver on its promises? Or is it outright common criminal stealing in order to convert to other uses? I mean, what is the best intelligence you have in this regard?
Akuyori, is a criminal, irrespective of the intention. And it's not only in the power sector. The rail lines, people go there to cut off those metals. The newly constructed rail lines, Lagos, Ibadan, they go there and they have to replace all those things from time to time. Inherently, some people are wicked and criminally minded. And the law must go frontally against them and give them maximum punishment for their offenses without missing words. And trials should be accelerated, maximum punishment and consequences should follow. It's not only in the power sector. Okay. It's bad in the power sector because from time to time it's vandalized. Uncle Yori, let me confess on here. In my university, Hangout cables are being vandalized routinely. And the entire university community had to be thrown into darkness. And it took the doggedness of the Vice Chancellor, of course, to weed out a lot of those elements. They will remove Hangout cable today. Two weeks later, another station, Hangout cable. A length costs millions, even in a university.
So this is one. So this is a major problem.
It's a Nigerian thing, and it's not only federal government. I'm sure not only our university of Lagos. I'm sure that universities are facing it. And electrical cables are something that you don't even go near except you have the experience. When we are talking about this electricity theft and bypass, I called one of the training. One of the things I said to them, I told them they weren't deploying the laws, and the laws were there. We opened their eyes and they started doing something in that regard. And we told them we had cases of some of their staff who ought to generate a bill of 3 million, 5 million for certain business concerns. And they will go and collude. They will raise a bill of 1.something million naira. Then they will go behind the scene to collect a bribe of 1 million naira. And the going concern makes a profit of 2.something million naira of expected electricity bill I ought to pay. And the bill will be shifted to Nigerians by way of tariff, whatever, adjustment. Because there were internal collusion even at the level of the discourse. And we pointed that out. Some of the discourse, of course, took up the challenge and they started looking inwards to deal with criminal elements within their rank and file. Well, so Nigerians who are disposed to criminality, no doubt.
We're going to have to leave it. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it here, Prof. And I mean, hearing from you, you are a researcher in the sector. So this is why the tale is even more distressing in that you must be talking from a point of view of knowledge. We've run out of time. We didn't get a chance to really relate to some of the solutions that you have also been considering. But then there'll be another day. Thank you very much, Professor.
From time to time, we think of the solutions. We have them documented. At some point, I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to apply those.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Professor Yemi Oke, Energy and Electricity Law Professor at the University of Lagos. Thank you very much once again. That's our program. Please join us tomorrow. Indeed. Join us tomorrow, please, for a fresh edition of the program. I'm Yori Folarin. Bye-bye for now.
Questions with Ini. Hi guys, Ini. Your skin is really glowing. What beauty soap do you use?
It's glowing because it's healthy. I use a soap that keeps my skin soft and protected from germs.
But Ini, the beauty soaps I know don't give germ protection.
Dettol Skincare does.
It combines Dettol's protection with argan oil to protect my skin. Gives me 2 times moisturization with a beautiful fragrance. Beautiful skin is germ-free skin.
The following is a paid presentation by ShopX TV. Today, there are many complex, boring, expensive, and useless exercise machines in the market. Or you pay over 400,000 naira a year for gym membership and never go. ShopX TV is proud to introduce Total Crunch Evolution, the compact, versatile fitness solution that is perfect for you. With Total Crunch, you get a complete fitness workout in one machine. Say goodbye to ineffective and complicated exercise machines. Now, you have the power to transform your fitness journey and get the body you have always wanted right in the comfort of